Hey, Will Mansell from Local 10 Sports here, and you are listening to SportsOvertime.com, where the clock doesn't matter.
It's the show for all your latest UFC news and rumors. It's Brian Coyle. It's Sean Stanley. It's the TFM Live podcast. And it's now.
And good evening once again. It is the TFM Live podcast brought to you by the FullMountMMA.com. I'm Sean Stanley, as always, joined by the hostess with the mostest, Brian Coyle. How you doing, sir?
I wouldn't consider myself the hostess with the mostest, or the host with the most, for that matter. But I've got some stuff to talk about.
I probably should have said hostess. I apologize for that.
Nah, it's not offensive either way. But here's what's pretty offensive. The way Holly Holm's career is kind of going down the drain right now is a draw. Like, this is kind of interesting, Sean. UFC Chicago, Valentina Shevchenko runs circles around her in a pretty fun night of fights in the Windy City. And this is something that we'll get to a little bit later on in the show with a special guest that will be joining us in about 15 minutes or so. But this take I've starting to see go around. Holly Holm loses to Valentina Shevchenko, shoving bantamweight into even more chaotic features than I've ever seen before. Like, what's going on here in this women's bantamweight division? We did a 3 and out on it. If you've never heard of us, the FullMountMMA.com, you can check out. We did a whole big feature on it. Sean, what do you think of, number one, Holly Holm's loss to Valentina Shevchenko, who looked really good on Saturday night, and number two, this women's bantamweight division that literally everyone's beating each other and we don't know what the heck's going on?
I think it's perfect for the UFC right now as far as the chaos, as we call it, in the bantamweight women's division here. Because it makes it watchable. It makes every fight must see, especially a championship fight. Because this time last year, I said in the 3 and out, is what anybody said, Nunes as the heavyweight champion in the women's bantamweight division. And it's made it must see to watch these fights. And, like you said, we're going to have a special guest on. We're going to talk about Holly Holm a little more in depth. But, I guess she made the most of her opportunity.
Yeah, this is a weird situation now, and we share differing opinions on this as far as if it's good for the division or not. But in a 5-round decision win, Holly Holm looked like the fighter that she was before Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
Someone that kind of was afraid to mix it up and tried to stay far away and box with people. And she didn't utilize all of her skills that we saw in that Ronda Rousey fight, because she was a world beater when she literally shocked the world in Australia. And now she's lost 2 straight, and the sky isn't exactly falling. But this woman, who was supposed to be one of the UFC's biggest draws, not only has lost the opportunity to Ronda Rousey rematch, we think at this point, but she just headlined a great card in Chicago on Big Fox that did great ratings, but she keeps losing, and that's never good for your drawing power. Of course, when she came in, she beat Raquel Pennington in something that wasn't exactly the most riveting fight. It was a split decision win.
Yeah, her first 2 fights were just blah.
Marion Reneau, it was kind of Then she goes out and beats Rousey out of nowhere. Like, there was a reason why nobody thought Rousey would get beaten by Holm, because she just wasn't ready yet. Then everything came together. Then she goes out, fights Misha Tate, and stays away, and was winning the fight because Tate was having not the best night in the world until she came out and got that 5th round stoppage. And then she did not look good at all against Shevchenko. This is got to be a discouraging pattern.
No, but she looked lost in that fight. She looked like she didn't know what to do.
Yeah, and that's not what you want out of someone that you tried to build this division around. It's like we mentioned, it's a chaotic division, and we did a 3 and out that you can find on the FullMountMMA.com. Like I mentioned, if you've never heard of us before, if you're just tuning in to SportsOvertime.com, if you found us on iTunes or YouTube by chance, we cover all the latest in the UFC and the mixed martial arts. You can find us online. We have a website where we do feature articles and talk about the latest news and all that good stuff on the FullMountMMA.com. On Twitter at the FullMountMMA, at BCoyle11. For me, at SS Sports Talk. For Sean, if you guys want to interact with the show anytime while you're listening, or send us questions for our podcast and all that. And one of the questions that was faced with us this week, chaos at women's bantamweight, good or bad? You say good because it makes every fight watchable. It makes it like it's kind of that anything can happen kind of mantra.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the UFC right now with these title fights, you don't. It's no longer okay. The champion's going to keep his belt. I mean, look at what has transpired in these championship fights. Bisping's a champion. Nunez is a champion. I mean, everybody's getting championship belts. It's like an Oprah.
Yeah, but here's the thing. When everyone gets a championship belt, what do the belts mean? What are these titles supposed to feel like?
Yeah, but see, that's where I think you're wrong with this with the UFC, because you're fighting for it. It's not like it's not like, I know we do this all the time. It's not like WWE where if ever the title changed hands every pay-per-view, it would diminish the belt. I think with this, you're fighting for the belt. So it's not like you're just being handed a belt.
No, yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from with that, but people loved Ronda Rousey because she was undefeated. She beat literally everybody. She had this personality, I don't want to say arrogant, but she had this swag about her. And you saw this with champions Anderson Silva when he won all the time, George St. Pierre. Guys like this, people get drawn to larger-than-life personalities, champions that retain their belt and keep consistency. The only guy that struggled with this is Demetrius Johnson. For some godforsaken reason, nobody watches his fights, which I can't understand because he's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world today.
I think that's the little guy syndrome. That's why nobody wants to watch him.
But when you look at 135 here in the women's division, I wrote it here. Holm beat Rousey. Rousey beat Tate twice. Tate beat Holm. Kat Zingano has beaten Amanda Nunes and Miesha Tate. Nunes beat Tate. Nunes beat Valentina Shevchenko. Shevchenko just beat Holm. Pena just beat Zingano. I don't know where to organize everybody in this kind of list of number one contenders because everyone's beating each other.
Isn't that what makes it so good?
But the problem being is, who are you going to push? Who are you going to make your main draw?
Make the division the draw. The whole division the draw. Oh my goodness. There's a new concept.
That's the angle that could work in theory. The problem is I don't know if it will work.
I just don't think you have that champion anymore in most of the divisions right now. Other than Johnson, who do you have as a champion that you would want to build? I mean, McGregor's not going probably back to 145. I won't say never, but more than likely, I don't see him going all the way back down to 145. That would probably be one of the only title holders you made. But then when he gets back down to 145, I mean, you got Aldo waiting for him. I don't think it's going to be the same fight, Aldo McGregor, this time.
Yeah, I mean, when you go up and down, I mean, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, that's a pretty entertaining division, if I do say so myself.
No, yeah, but again, she kind of stands head and shoulders. She's kind of going to have, I think, the Mighty Mouse Johnson syndrome there.
Where she's just dominating everyone else.
Yeah, she's kind of outclassing everybody else, Maybe somebody's going to come in and beat her, and then that'll take that off. But, I mean, she just looks – because, I mean, everybody was like, oh, this is the fight where she's going to lose it. And she looked more dominant in that fight than most fights she's had.
So it's a matter of if you can market the division as a whole, like an anything can happen sort of scenario, I get where you're coming from. But from a star-making scenario – this is the worst nightmare for the UFC because you don't know what to put your marketing. You don't know who to put your money behind, for lack of a better word. Because, to me, if you want to create these big stars, they have to go out and deliver. They have to go out and win a couple bouts.
Yeah, but I guess my problem is, if you're the UFC and you say no fighter is bigger than the UFC, why are you doing that stance then?
Well, that's the thing here. I mean, the old regime now the Fertittas supposedly had said that. Now, do we all know that the fighters make the UFC, not the UFC makes the fighters? I mean, they're given the platform, but Conor McGregor is only Conor McGregor because of what he did, and he was given the platform by the UFC. So it's a give and take.
Well, no, yeah, they're giving something. Look, they cracked the door. You got to kick the door down.
Yeah, and I don't know. Just for me, I feel like if they want a TV draw, if they want these big time fighters, there needs to be like if the let me take this analogy for example. The NBA has never been healthier. How many teams can win the NBA title? 3?
3, maybe 4.
Maybe 4. If the league was complete,
Depends if you ask Derrick Rose.
Yeah, if you look at the league previous, like before these super teams, you had all this parity, but the ratings weren't as good. But now you have these superstar teams, and the ratings are through the roof, but there's not as much parity. So it just seems like more eyes get drawn to individual stars rather than the actual division itself. And we'll see how this all kind of shakes out. But for me, Holm losing was a bad thing for the division, not a great thing. But now Valentina Shevchenko, who's looked very good in all of her fights so far in the UFC. I mean, that Nunes loss, we talked about it more when that happened as the Nunes wasn't as impressive as we thought. But we have to give Shevchenko probably more credit there for the way she fought in that bout. And now she's got a victory over Holly Holm in the main event of a UFC on Fox card that at one point apparently drew 4 million people watching it. So it's something to monitor, but like, what are your thoughts on Shevchenko? Where does she fit into all this?
No, I mean, again, this is where I don't know if they go wrong putting. I mean, I understand what you're saying where there's no way where you can sit there and go, okay, she deserves the next fight because of all the disparity. But then again, that's to me, that's what, because like Shevchenko could jump in and be the next fight.
Yeah, it's not unheard of.
You know, I mean, so to me, it makes it just that much more of a perfect storm for that division right now, especially when you don't have that dominant Rousey or something like that. This is what they needed. I don't think Holm sitting on the top, or maybe Tate is a little different, but Holm sitting on top with the belt, just keeping on winning, I don't know, it would help the division thrive. This is going to help the division thrive, possibly flourish without Rousey.
Well, we shall see what the next move is for the women's bantamweight division. Could it be Rousey's return fight against Amanda Nunes? Is Amanda Nunes, will she defend the belt before then? Because all eyes are pointed towards that November card at Madison Square Garden in New York City. I will be there, so that's the kind of angle that they're pushing at this point. If not, I expect that title to be defended sooner rather than later. All right, Sean, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we've got a special guest joining us live on the line to talk about UFC Chicago a little bit and that one-hit wonder syndrome that Holly Holm may have. I'm expecting a interesting back and forth on Brock Lesnar and his latest exploits in both the UFC and the WWE. And we'll preview a little bit of UFC 201 coming up this weekend with Robbie Lawler and Tyron Woodley. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll have a special guest join us live next on TFM Live, the official podcast of the FullMountMMA.com.
For all your latest news and rumors of the UFC, go to the FullMountMMA.com. Now back to the TFM Live podcast. Here's Brian Coyle and Sean Stanley.
All right, we bring it back in here. Sean Stanley, Brian Coyle with you here. TFM Live, the official podcast of the FullMountMMA.com. We discussed a little bit about the women's bantamweight division.
There
Wish
you
I
go.
could speak there. Hey, how about that?
It's late.
It is. And now I think we're going to dive in to UFC 201.
Yes, that would be the one that comes after UFC 200.
See, that's what happens when you have those bigger fights and then the UFC Chicago, you lose track.
Yes, you do. I want to talk about the main event of UFC 201. We'll talk about Rose Namajunas and Karolina Kowalczyk in a little bit. But, John, I'm watching the Rory McDonald Robbie Lawler fight on my train ride home, and it occurred to me. I mean, this isn't a light bulb moment where I'm figuring something out than everyone else. Robbie Lawler takes a lot of punishment the most punishment I've ever seen from pretty much any champion fighter. It's a very interesting matchup that he has here against Tyron Woodley, who hasn't exactly been a guy that's gone the distance a lot, but some of his knockouts have been absolutely insane. His knockout of Josh Koscheck, where he just floored him, immediately comes to mind. When you look at this fight, which, I mean, some people will say, oh, it's 201 and Demetrius Johnson. But this is a fight you should watch for sure, because you never miss Robbie Lawler fighting. How do you feel about this fight going into it? Because I have some eerie feelings about this. I want to get your take.
Well, I mean, they've trained together. Well, at least in the same team, and you know, I've been listening since this fight was first brought up that it was going to be happening. That, you know, there's so much, like, I think Woodley even went and trained at another camp and things like this, and it's, I mean, I know Lawler is going to sit there and you're going to have to knock him out to get the title out of his hands. But
it's really interesting because Lawler's the type of guy who takes so much punishment over and over and over again. And meanwhile, you have this guy in Woodley who hasn't fought in a while. He hasn't been able to, like, he was supposed to fight Johnny Hendricks back in October. That didn't happen because Hendricks had a very bad weight cut and dropped out of the fight. He showed up, did his thing, was all good to go. Then, like, he hasn't fought since January of 2015 against Kelvin Gastelum. That was a split decision. He's kind of just sat on the sidelines. He broke his foot. He hasn't. Some people say, like, there have been more deserving fighters for this, but he's waited around. He's getting his shot against Robbie Lawler now. And Lawler, for all the stuff, like, I feel like I've picked against Robbie Lawler every single time he's defended the belt. I picked against him when Roy McDonald was in it because I thought it was finally his time. He took a lot of punishment in that fight. But, man, he took the opportunity, crushed McDonald's face in, literally, till he couldn't take it anymore and knocked him out in the fifth round. A very close fight against Carlos Condit. And now he gets Woodley, and eventually you would think Lawler can't take all this punishment every single fight. Is Woodley the guy, in your opinion, that could take him down?
yeah, 100%, I believe so.
Yeah, it's one of these interesting kind of situations where you know what you're going to get out of Robbie Lawler. He is this kind of guy who can avoid every single takedown that you throw at him. He's good because the sprawls against McDonald were absolutely incredible. It's something like all fight fans need to watch it. It's on the UFC YouTube page. You can watch that fight. It's an absolute war. And then, but you see McDonald try to throw these takedowns in out of nowhere, and Lawler immediately drops it, sprawls, and is all good. I don't understand how he can continually do these things, because you would think taking all of this punishment, immediately getting trying to get taken down, getting these head kicks, especially in that McDonald fight, and Condit as well, throwing these razor sharp elbows. You think a guy like that wouldn't be able to take all of it. But Lawler's the type of guy, he's been doing this for over 15 years at this point.
Yeah, but at some point it's going to catch up to you, right?
That's the thing I'm getting at here. Like, is Tyron Woodley the guy that gets him? Because we don't know exactly. Like,
I mean, they've worked out together, and I guess my thing is, like, how long have they been, quote unquote, like, teammates? I
mean, Lawler just obviously did not spend all of his time, like, in his, like, comeback. Mm-hmm. For example, like, he's been with American Top Team, but now, like, they don't train in the same gym all that often. They've kind of downplayed that whole teammate sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But, like, it's got a weird
usually when you're
fight
in the same kind of camps, like American Top Team, a lot of them travel around, so you're sparring with the same style, the same kind of people that he's sparring with. Maybe not at the same time or at same gyms.
Yeah.
But you're able to get guys that have sparred with him. Not saying they're Robbie Lawler by no means, but I think when you have that ability, you know, Jose Aldo said, I had spies. I knew exactly what he's doing. Imagine if you're in the same camp, team, or have that ability to know people that have worked with, same goes both ways, too, now for Lawler, too, because he's probably going to spar people that have worked with Woodley. So they're going to know, at least have an idea of a lot of tendencies that they do. So it's going to be an interesting chess match. I just think, Robbie Lawler's always hungry, but Woodley, I think this time, he knows this might be his only time.
Yeah, because
he needs to take advantage of it.
The way I look at this is, Mike Bowen of MMA Junkie put out some great statistics today. Lawler has absorbed 691 significant strikes in UFC competition since January 1st, 2013. He's absorbed 531 significant strikes in UFC championship fights. That's the most in UFC championship history. This guy takes a beating every single time, but he keeps coming. His takedown attempts in the UFC, he's completed 80% of them, the highest accuracy rate in the company history. Woodley is obviously got a wrestling background, but I don't know how useful it will be to him when he's got a guy like Lawler who can sprawl and wrestle with the best of them, and he'll try to get him into a war. Now, the thing with Woodley is he's got such incredible knockout power where it might be a little different this time around because McDonald wasn't a knockout artist. Condit wasn't as much of a knockout artist as you get with Woodley. Like, he gets so big following that weight cut. Like, he looks like a whole nother human being, it seems like. And I don't know if this is finally when the dam breaks. What do you like? Who are you picking in this fight? If you had to choose, if we have to put it on the line, and I've checked the standings right now. I'm looking at it right in front of me. You're up 13. You have 13. You're 13-5, and I'm 10-8. Since this is going back to UFC 198, where we're picking main event fights, co-main event fights, all of that nature. Who do you have in this UFC 201 main event bout?
It hurts me to say because I want Lawler to win, but I'm going with Woodley.
You're going with Woodley.
I'm going with Woodley.
Is it a particular feeling? Do you think this is finally
I just have this thing that, look, that punishment has got to take its toll. I mean, I understand he's one of the toughest guys, and you know what? He's been through wars and battles, and you have to sit there and you have to. But on top of all that, he still has to do training. You know, these camps. At some point, your body, you know, maybe you don't need that big hit anymore. Like, you know, it might just be something small. With all the punishment you've already taken, can turn into a big thing, a big punch, a big comeback, and there you go. I mean, I just think Woodley is hungry.
Yep.
And I mean, I trust me. I know he's probably gonna have to pry the belt out of Lawler's hands. He's gonna have to win it because Lawler's probably not gonna lose it.
No, that's for damn sure. Of the last couple of fights that we've seen out of Robbie Lawler,
Yep.
I'm going Lawler in this fight. Simply because I don't know if Woodley's the guy to do it. I haven't seen enough out of him where, like, because he's been out for a while. He hasn't fought since January of last year. It's a year and a half off. That's a lot of time. And Lawler's not going to be a guy that's going to force the issue on the ground. He's not going to want to wrestle with him as much as Woodley would probably like. And this is a 5-round championship fight. When you look at Tyron Woodley, his last couple fights, a third-round split decision win, a round 1 knockout, a third-round unanimous loss to Rory McDonald, a round 2 knockout of Carlos Condit, which was assisted by the fact that Condit's knee blew out. Josh Koscheck, we mentioned before, a round 1 knockout. Jake Shields, he lost a split decision victory. He's not a guy that's got a big gas tank. This is the first time he could possibly go in to the 4th and 5th rounds. And Lawler loves to draw this thing out.
I agree with that, but my thing is that if his camp, and I know he's got a good camp, they know what Lawler's going to do. So I would think that they've had him getting conditioned. And I understand it's a whole different ballgame when you're in there in the octagon and adrenaline and you're getting punched and kicked and everything else. But I have to think that they know this, that they know that he hasn't gone through all these wars like what Lawler has, and they know Lawler's going to kind of keep him at bay and try to, string out the fight and everything else. So I got to think that they've been working on that, and I just don't see that as being the knock on this fight.
To me, the longer this fight goes, the more it benefits Robbie Lawler. The shorter, if Woodley wants to come out swinging and try to knock out Lawler, go for it, because I can't think of anybody with a tougher chin, possibly Nate Diaz if you want to go that route, than Robbie Lawler has right now. The guy's like impenetrable, it seems like at this point. But then again, he's taken so much punishment over the years. Who knows what the heck could happen? And the way these fights have been going, like everything that we thought we knew just gets thrown out the window in the UFC. You mentioned earlier in the show, anybody can beat anybody. And I definitely don't want to discredit Woodley. I just think Lawler, this isn't the guy to knock off Lawler yet. At least I don't think so. But we'll see. Co-main event.
You have said that quite a few times, though, and we've been talking about how I'm ahead. Just saying.
I need to, be different.
No, yeah, and definitely.
I need to make up
100%. 100%. I agree.
In the co-main event, Rose Namajunas, who's looked fantastic in her last couple of bouts, against undefeated, and I've been practicing her name all day, so I'm going to probably still screw it up, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, an undefeated strawweight who this will be her third UFC fight. She beat Randa Marcos. She beat Heather Jo Clark in the last two bouts that she's had. And this is the type of fight that can kind of thrust her into the spotlight, Kowalkiewicz, at 115 pounds, or this can solidify the fact that Rose Namajunas might be the next person to challenge for Joanna Jędrzejczyk's belt. How do you see this one coming out? Because we've seen a lot of the Rose. That performance against Paige Van Zandt was something else. What do you see coming from Rose Namajunas in this bout?
I see a long night for the woman whose name I can't pronounce.
Kowalkiewicz.
I see a long night for her. I do. I just Rose is a pit bull. She really is. Or with her size, what would it be, a chihuahua? I guess I don't know, but she has.
She's a thug, dude.
Yeah,
That's her nickname.
She's a thug. No, I know that, but she is. But it's so weird though, because like with the Paige Van Zandt thing, she came out like meaning business, but I was like, oh, she don't look that. And then, man, when she struck, oh my goodness, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And I just think the same thing's going to happen. And you're going to see her in line for probably the next title fight.
She's looked great. She did ever since her loss to Carla Esparza on The Ultimate Fighter. That was her first technically UFC fight. She's submitted Angela Hill, who is definitely, it's not a name in the UFC right now, but still a very, very good fighter. She took care of Paige Van Zandt. She took care of Tisha Torres. This is the kind of fight that's tailor-made for Rose to kind of grab the brass ring, so to speak, and be like, hey, I want the next shot at Joanna, and this is why. And this, for Kowalkiewicz, this is an opportunity. This is her biggest fight of her career, and she gets an opportunity here to really be like, hey, Joanna isn't the only Polish fighter that somebody should take notice of. This is the thing with 115, which is, it's kind of a newer division where it's not as deep. You have the people at the top like Adelia and Jędrzejczyk, but Rose, Kowalkiewicz, fighters like these can go out here and really make a name for themselves and kind of skyrocket up these rankings, because the depth of the division isn't as strong, and it could change too if the UFC adds a women's flyweight division as well. So when you see this, like names like Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas, Tisha Torres, Carolina Kovalevich, all these people have these opportunities. Michelle Waterson's got an opportunity in Hamburg in her next fight in September. Like names like that, where you can go out and put together 3 wins in a row, and all of a sudden you're this close to a title shot. Or you put together 2 wins in a row, you might be this close to a title shot. But I think we're in agreement here. I think Rose Namajunas is the pick here, and until proven otherwise, I think is the way to put it. We in agreement here?
100%, sir.
Yes. So we'll differ on the main event, and then we'll agree on the co-main event. This, of course, was supposed to be the card where Demetrius Johnson defended his title against Wilson Heiss. That's not happening because of an injury. Mighty Mouse, Wilson Heiss gets Hector Sandoval, who does not have a picture on UFC.com, so that goes to show how Heiss has fallen from co-main event status to the prelims. So on FS2, actually. So not a good day.
FS2 from that?
Yeah, it's because I guess there's something on with Saturday night, FS1. I don't know exactly. I guess maybe baseball, but I guess it's kicking it off that way. But there is another fight that I did want to talk about. Matt Brown and Jake Ellenberger. Last time we saw Matt Brown, wasn't he not having a good time in Brazil?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, he was having a very good, very bad,
weekend.
horrible, terrible, no good, very bad time in Brazil.
Yeah.
He looks like
he
a
was
guy
fighting in and out of the ring.
Yeah. The immortal Matt Brown, he's got 3 losses in his last 4 fights, with the 1 win coming over Tim Means last July via round 1 submission. This is a big fight for Matt Brown. He's kind of, got to get back on the winning track here if he wants to kind of assert himself in welterweight.
Stay ahead of that cut line.
Yeah, I don't think he's on the cut line, but like if you lose to Jake Ellenberger and then you lose your next fight, it's.
Well, you never know though with these new owners coming in. They might. You know what? Let's get some new blood, especially for some of this. Middle of the. You start losing 2, 3. Why do you keep them around and not try to get some new blood in there?
That's true. I'm picking Matt Brown in this fight. Where are you going here? What do you think?
I'm just going to go Ellenberger to be different.
Just going to be different?
I'm going to be different because I just think it's going to be one of those fights to where it's like, something's going to happen. Don't know what, you don't know when.
Well, Ellenberger needs his fight too because he's won once in the past 6 fights.
Oh, my goodness.
And his 1 win came over Josh Koscheck in February.
Can I take back my pick?
Yeah, you can. You can switch it. I just wanted to give you that information.
I'm good, Ellenberger.
All right. So that's UFC 201. Not the biggest, names on the card with the exception of the main event.
But aren't these the cards, though, that, just exceed the expectation?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the Sioux City card on Wednesday possibly just as good as any of the pay-per-view events, the UFC 200 pay-per-view event from a fight perspective? Maybe. So don't sleep on these kinds of cards, especially with Lawler and Woodley headlining. That should be a great fight because Lawler fights are always interesting fights. And we don't know what we're going to get out of Woodley. We haven't seen him in a while. We've seen him on TV. He's pretty good at that UFC Tonight analyst kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, he does very well.
So let's see if he can put all that tape watching to work and take care of what seems to be an impenetrable fort. A guy who just takes so much punishment, never go down, and then eventually wear you out and then knock you out in the 4th or 5th rounds and Robbie Lawler. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dive into a little bit more of the Holly Holm one-hit wonder stuff. We're going to talk a little Brock Lesnar, next move for the WWE superstar, which I don't think UFC fighter will ever come after that. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll talk about that and more when we come back on TFM Live, the official podcast of the FullMountMMA.com.
For all your latest news and rumors of the UFC, go to the FullMountMMA.com. Now back to the TFM Live podcast. Here's Brian Coyle and Sean Stanley.
All right, Sean Stanley, Brian Coyle, TFM Live podcast brought to you by the FullMountMMA.com. Brian, we've already discussed 201. We discussed the Chicago card, Holly Holm falling. Where can we go next with this?
One thing I did want to talk about, we want to go back to real quick, the UFC Chicago card. Edson Barboza against Gil Melendez. That was a fun fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Edson Barboza, again, this guy keeps showing why, like, he should be considered for a title shot almost at this point.
Hey, listen, if I got kicked like that, I would have just said, you know what? I'm done. Did you
good.
see Melendez's leg?
It was not looking good.
No.
Oof. And I'd love to see Edson Barboza go up against Khabib Nurmagomedov just for fun, I think, at this point, because it's a weird little spot at lightweight. Eddie Alvarez is the champ. Don't know where it's going to go next. Tony Ferguson maybe deserves that spot. We haven't been able to get Ferguson Nurmagomedov. That fight dropped out. Ferguson got away with one against Lando Veneta at that Sioux Falls card. Sioux Falls. I think I said Sioux City before. It's Sioux Falls. My mistake.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you said Sioux City Falls. I think you're technically right somehow.
It's the middle of the country. They'll get over it. But Barboza now, I think the next fight is Dos Anjos or Nurmagomedov, because we saw the Ferguson fight.
If it's against Dos Anjos, then that's an eliminator fight, right?
I think so. That's a fun little fight. If we could kind of put Khabib and Tony against each other, and then Barboza and Dos Anjos against each other, maybe that's a little bit of good matchmaking. But of course, we have to make Alvarez defend the title soon. So
who's he fight?
yeah, right. But Barboza, Melendez looked good in his first fight back. He can definitely still go.
Yeah, better than I thought he would. Better than I thought he would.
For sure. But Barboza, those kicks, man. Those kicks.
That's a game changer. It really is, man. When you start, after the first kick he landed, the knee started turning red.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And then, like, I always joke on Twitter, like, there will be kicking. But, like, by God, this guy can kick the shoulders off of somebody, like somebody's head off their shoulders.
I think he would have kicked my knee like in two. It would have separated. I don't see how Melendez was able to withstand. I know at the end, he's barely able to put pressure on. He was jumping around on one leg almost by the end of that fight. But still, the fact that he stayed in there, Yeah.
A couple other quick hitters we want to get to before the end of the show. I think we might have to postpone our special guest until next week. I don't know at this point. But I've got some news, Sean, that you may have heard, may have not heard. This broke tonight, on a Wednesday night. Gegard Mousasi, Vitor Belfort, UFC 204 in Manchester, England. That is the card, of course, that has Michael Bisping against, you called it, Dan Henderson in his final fight in the UFC.
What'd I tell you?
You were. I'm going to give you full credit for that one because
sure. That was the only way Henderson was going to get a title shot.
Yeah.
Was it Bisping won the belt?
Yep, and it lined up beautifully. And now we get Vitor Belfort and Gegard Mousasi on that card. Mousasi has looked great his past couple fights, beating Thales Leitis and Thiago Santos in vicious fashion at UFC 200 over Santos.
Yeah.
Man, I did not expect that one to happen, but
not like that.
No. Belfort, of course, was completely dominated by Jacare back at UFC 198. I think this is a good piece of matchmaking here. I don't know if it's a co-main event status, but I think these guys, like Mousasi, needs a big name. And Vitor Belfort technically still is a big name.
I don't think it's like taking a legend out to slaughter. Or not a legend, but a name out to slaughter.
I think it's because Mousasi wanted a big name, and I don't think he's earned the right to get a bigger name to be in that upper echelon of middleweights yet. Go take out Belfort out of the picture, and then, all right, we can talk. I think it kind of works for him. And then Vitor Belfort, it's like, all right, you got one more shot, or you're pretty much kind of falling down the pipe here, and you can only beat up old dudes. Because I think it's a good fight with a lot of stakes on it, personally.
Well, I think Mousasi's got a lot of stake. I don't think Belfort has much to win or lose.
It's one of those things where, all right, we'll see what happens. But I think it's a good fight to put on that card. Just I don't think it's co-main event worthy, but we'll see. Because, I mean, with the main event being what it is, they don't want the co-main event to overshadow it, which could be a real possibility. No offense to Dan Henderson at this point, but, I mean, he's fighting for a title shot, and he's, 45 years old? And
Yeah, but look what he's been doing.
like, what has he been doing, Sean?
Knocking people out.
Didn't he get knocked out by Vitor Belfort?
Yeah.
Do we want to go down that road?
That seems like many moons ago. That's kind of like the women's bantamweight division.
Well, that was in November. He got knocked out by Vitor. He did beat Hector Lombard, who, man, that guy's falling fast, quick. He beat Tim Boach in New Orleans in June of 2015. And, oh, by the way, he lost to Gegard Mousasi in January of last year. But, I mean, come on.
Hey, you got to give the man a shot.
Yeah, why not? I guess. Bisping should wipe the floor with him. Not the
No, not so fast, my friend.
Should.
That championship jinx, I'm telling you. And with the guy with the power punch, imagine the story. Oh,
I couched it.
It could be just the old wrestling thing. You put it onto the guy knowing he's going to pass it on to he's just a holder of the belt.
He's a title holder. Two more news stories I want to get to. Number one, Joe Rogan re-signing with the UFC, 1-year deal, multiple stipulations to that deal.
Good for him.
Yeah, no international travel, just pay-per-view events. Take it. That's got to be nice, right? He said he would 100% leave if the UFC was sold in May. So, I guess they came to him, and Dana White came to him and was like, "Come on,
Money
you love
speaks,
this.
buddy. Money
Do
talks."
This. Yeah. And I love the Joe Rogan screams. Come on, who doesn't?
It's good. I like that pairing together, but also I like the stand and
I like one half of that pairing.
Okay.
I mean, everything is virtually identical except for some of the talent on the UFC announcing staff. But final story, and
tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I heard him call an NFL game. It didn't work out too good.
Oh.
Brock Lesnar. He's still in the news because he is Brock Lesnar.
Yeah. Apparently he's bulletproof.
Literally. WWE will not be punishing Lesnar for his violation of the USADA drug testing.
I call double standard on that one.
Because he is a part-time performer for WWE.
They fired a trainer down in NXT that popped positive for a bodybuilding competition, and they fired him.
Would that be the badass Billy Gunn?
That would be.
And that was a guy with a name, too. Lesnar apparently has not talked about this, but I can only imagine the conversation in Titan Tower saying, "Brock, we're just going to suspend you right before, but you won't have to appear on TV." No, I don't want to be suspended. Okay, you're not going to be suspended.
You're on Raw next week, buddy.
Yeah, you'll be on TV. We'll get a nice big pop in the ratings. We'll have Randy Orton shoot on you, and
and then we'll fine him. We'll fine him a little bit of money just because he shot on you and you're an enhancement.
Yes, it's but the greatest thing about this, and he's absolutely right, Mark Hunt, if you have not heard the interview on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, I can't really repeat any of it here for his thoughts on the UFC.
He's upset.
Yeah, he should be,
Yeah, but here you go with this, okay? This is what I'll say this.
Okay.
Mark Hunt went in knowing this guy's juiced up.
He did say that before the fight.
You still signed the fight, right?
He did still sign the fight.
Nothing's changed. Okay, thank you. That's all I got to say.
No, it's fine. But I'm trying to see if there's any part of this that I can really read.
The UFC, and that's about it.
Okay. Here's some quotes from it. I'll just make this quick. Look at him. There's no way that guy makes 265 pounds. He's sticking blank in his blank like the rest of those cheaters. The thing about that is he's sitting, this is a fair place. Well, it's not fair. These guys are cheating. They should be in court for it. They should lose all their money if they're cheating, because if I die in there, who's going to look after my family? That's corrupt bleep, man. These bleep should be penalized hard. Dirty, bleeping, cheating, bleeps. So Mark Hunt, not happy. And I've seen this kind of thrown around too. The PED cheater, if a PED user beats someone and that opponent dies in the octagon. And this is one of those things where people have been just kind of throwing it out there like, oh yeah, that would happen. That like this we've seen the sport is not what it used to be, number one. So there's protection for these fighters in place. But I do understand where they're coming from. But the problem is you have to, when you sign away, you're going in there, you're going to get beat up. You have to take into account that this kind of stuff could happen. There are ways to, the UFC has to get on top of this more, that fighters don't fight while on the drugs and pop after. This is obviously the biggest example of it with the biggest fighter and the biggest thing. But Sean, what's your take on all that? Because that's a very interesting conversation to have.
But I mean, here's my thing, okay? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, some of this PED usage thing gets put to where, oh, these guys are, roided out of their head. They're going to go in there and snap on somebody. But it's not like
barroom
brawl.
No.
You still got to land the punches. I mean, at one point, I thought Hunt was going to win the fight.
Yeah.
He had him rocked a little bit, but he didn't count. And look, I understand whatever you want to say. Oh, he juiced up this and that. But it's not like the guy was in there, he's got to weigh in at a certain weight. He's got to, he does the same thing you do. I mean, as far as, he might be a little bit bigger, but I understand what they mean by the PED usage and things like that. But at the same time, ultimately, you have to weigh in. You're the same weight. I mean, look what happened with Cyborg.
Yeah.
Now, that guy wasn't on PEDs. He put a knee through the guy's skull.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody looks at these PEDs and are like, oh, not the punches. Lesnar was landing punches on Hunt's forehead, and not one of them crushed his skull.
No, this was it's these guys are taking this to a point. They're clearing out PED users as fast as they can. At least the UFC's done this.
Yeah.
Because, man, everybody was on everything. You go a couple years back at this point. So you have to take into account, that this process isn't perfect yet. And I get cheater's a cheater. Chad Mendes gets suspended 2 years. Lesnar's never going to fight again. Jones is suspended for 2 years, likely. Even more maybe at this point. So there are penalties and there are things in place. And it seemed like everybody was popping for everything in the past month. So I understand Mark Hunt's frustration, but he has to realize, that if you go off like this, it comes off kind of crazy. And I'm all for fighters union and everything coming together, but that's a long way away too. So if he wants to go off and say all this stuff, go ahead. But when you say bleep your bleep company and you're a fighter for the UFC, you can't just go around doing that. It's the new owners of this company are not going to like it. So, I mean, he's fought long enough where he doesn't have to worry about this kind of stuff, and he's trying to say it for these other fighters, but man, this Legend situation has escalated so much, and Brock, on the other hand, is all right, and it seems like he's just going to show up on Monday. Are they the WWE going to talk about it? Probably not. So this is one of those things that's going to be done.
Well, the crowd's going to give it to him, I think.
Oh yeah, I think so. But he's Brock Lesnar, and that's the argument that's been used for probably the reason why he's not going to get suspended over this.
And plus, it's pro wrestling. They want the larger-than-life people. That's what they want.
There's courtroom documents to explain that one back in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. So this whole situation, hopefully it gets better. Hopefully the PED usage will eventually get better and better and better. Hell, Russia's had state-sponsored doping. At least we're not at this point. All right? This isn't Drago and Rocky IV getting shot up in a basement attached to the whole machines. These are guys trying to go around the system, and the system's catching them. This is what it's supposed to do. So eventually more and more will get better and better at this, and you won't eliminate cheating completely, but you'll try to take as much away as it can, because people always go around this. The system will never catch up to the people.
Here's my question, though, too, about the Lesnar thing, okay?
Sure.
Supposedly he took, 4 tests, and they were clean?
Yeah.
And then he popped on the last 2 that he took?
Yep.
So what? I mean, that right there tells you he probably wasn't about to make weight. So, I mean, he took the fight, a month out?
Yeah.
And I know the last time I saw him on WWE, which was, I think, 2-3 weeks before that, he was well over probably 3.
Yeah. So it's one of these things where, like, we saw it coming. We didn't want to believe it. But now this is the world we live in. So you have to be able to, deal with it at this point. It's such a weird conversation to have, and we'll talk about it more.
And the other thing is this. I mean, this is what's going to happen in the UFC, okay? They're going to take PEDs out of it, okay?
They're going to try their best, yeah.
Well, okay, they're going to try. But even as they do, you're going to have fighters getting injured more.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to come back as quickly and things like that. So then what are you going to have?
And then you have these things where who's to judge what is safe and what is not safe? Some of these things are over the counter in GNC. Who's the judge? Like, USADA can be this judge, jury, and executioner on all this. But some guys will have medical clearances on stuff. So this process will never be perfect.
No, it won't. And then, I mean, my whole thing is once you clean it out and then you got people getting injured, and then most of the time people take PEDs for recovery.
Yeah.
Not for much else, because, look, it's not human for these guys to go out here, do the fighting that they do, and then be ready to fight 30 days later.
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, I'm not saying that everybody's on PEDs, don't get me wrong, but you have to start looking at some of this stuff when they're fighting 30, 60 days later after some of these guys that have been in some of these wars. I mean, bodies don't heal like that.
It's a crazy situation. And when you look at baseball and you look at these other sports, either everyone's on PEDs or no one's on PEDs. That's the way you have to play it. And you can say no one's on PEDs, but people will always try to circumvent the system, and you always catch people. Mm-hmm. This is like the system will never be 100% foolproof, and it will never be 100% correct either.
Yeah, because you look for the next thing that can beat the test.
Yeah, you look for the next thing that can beat
catch that, and then you're already looking for the next thing.
And what makes this certain drug better than this certain drug? If they're like this close and it's a higher level than this, like it's one of many problems that USADA and UFC have to deal with right now. And Mark Hunt unloading does not make it any better. Supposedly Jeff Nowitzki of the UFC talked to him, and they had a good conversation about it. But man, who knows what the future is of Hunt? We probably know what the future is of Lesnar, and we'll see the next big name to get popped, because there's going to be another name. It just, it will never stop. So that's kind of a buzzkill. Do you got anything fun before we head off the air here?
No, man, you just brought this show to a screeching halt.
Well, UFC 201 is going to be awesome.
Yes, it will be.
You can check out a breakdown of Robbie Lawler and Tyron Woodley's fight tomorrow on Thursday. And if you're listening to this on Thursday or Friday, it's already up for your viewing pleasure. I break down how Robbie Lawler can win the fight, how Tyron Woodley can win the fight. All you can find on thefullmountmma.com. You can find us on Twitter at The Full Mount, on Twitter at BCore11 for me, at SS Sports Talk for Sean. And Sean, I think I have something special for us, even though we weren't be able to get a special guest on today. If you head on over to Facebook right now, and I think it's facebook.com/thefullmount. If I can, or let me make sure and line this up. If you head on to facebook.com/thefullmountmma, you can find our official Facebook page.
What?
Yes, this is something cool. So we will continue as we tweet out all our articles on social media, on Twitter. We will also start putting it out on Facebook. So please like our Facebook page, facebook.com/thefullmountMMA. We got that. We're on Facebook.
Popping. Big things popping. I'd say.
Right before your grandparents. I know your parents are probably on Facebook, but we beat your grandparents out. So
yes, we did. That's
good. All right. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, sir.
For taking the time out of your busy day and recording and making all this stuff work. You guys can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, The Full Mount, TFM Live. You just type it in the search bar, it'll pop right up for you. Subscribe, rate us, review us, tweet at us, like I mentioned before. Comment on our Facebook page. Let us know what you think, what you want, anything we can change with the website. We want to hear your voice as part of the fullmountmma.com. So head on over to the website. You can check out my preview of Woodley Lawler and much, much more on the fullmountmma.com. So for Sean, I'm Brian, and we are out.
The TFM Live Podcast is brought to you by thefullmountmma.com. Check us out on Twitter @thefullmount.